So Thom has been a Rotarian since 1980, serving as club president, Rotary District Governor, and has recently finished a 2-year term on the board of directors for Rotary International. He was vice president of Rotary International in 2010-2011, and he is currently in his 4th year of a 6-year term as a member of the Strategic Planning Committee for Rotary International. In addition, he is vice chair of the steering committee for the Rotary USA Global Alliance. Now, I know that Thom is obviously passionate about Rotary, but also, like many of us, is seeing that Rotary needs to go through a period of change. We need to change to be more relevant in today's modern society. So I welcome Thom to the podium today, and I'm sure we'll all look forward to what Thom has to say.
Thank you, Graham, and thank you, sir, for the invitation. It's good to be here. I'm always worried when I come this far to speak to an audience about the expectations. So I want to realign your expectations a little more realistically. The first significant speech I gave as a Rotarian was as governor-elect in my district at the district assembly. So that is the gathering where we're doing our best to orient and train the incoming leaders of the clubs for the coming year. In our district, it's been a tradition for a long time that the past district governors would sit in the back row of the auditorium and critique the incoming governor. And so it's a nerve-wracking experience to speak at that first coming out party, as it were. I spent a lot of time writing the speech and thinking about what to talk about. I decided to speak about polio and our efforts to eradicate the disease. So I wove it throughout my speech. I talked about where we were when we started, how we started, our efforts, the amazing feeling that you get when you hold a child and drop the drops in their mouth. And then I ended the speech by urging the Rotarians in our district to continue our efforts to eradicate Rotary from the face of this earth. So now that I've realigned your expectations, we can go ahead and talk about the future of Rotary. And I will tell you, the future of Rotary is really an interesting topic for all of us. We sit in a world that's changing and changing rapidly. And our organization is an organization today that is truly a business model developed in the 1950s. We are, plain and simply, an organization that's been oriented towards my father's generation. We sit on the edge of a changing world. And let me give you a sense of how much we've changed and how much farther we have to go. I joined the Hopkins, Minnesota Rotary Club in 1980. I was 24 years of age and right out of law school. I graduated from Marquette Law School, based in Milwaukee. During law school, I was a bit of a wild man with an afro out to here. But I cut my hair short to start practicing law with my father. My first meeting at the Hopkins Rotary Club, they were 140 members strong. I walked in, and that day, they pledged allegiance to the flag. They recited the 4-way test. They sang 3 songs, the first one being Daisy, Daisy. Now, my favorite group at the time were the Stones. It was an all-male club. I had just graduated from law school in a class that was half female and half male. I was almost offended that I was being forced by my father to join an all-male organization. But I joined. He told me it would be good for business. At some point farther down the line, I became president of my club. It wasn't necessarily by choice, but it was my turn. I was asked and I served. I had yet to really become committed to Rotary. I was still the youngest member of the Hopkins Club. The average age when I became president was somewhere between 96 and 112. I chose that year to be careful and run the meeting the way we'd always run the meeting. The meeting was an hour and a half long. The speaker spoke for half an hour. We did the traditional things that we'd always done. We sang our songs. I do want to tell you that I ran the meeting better than almost anybody before me. But we did almost nothing new that year. The only new project we did is we installed portable defibrillators in the meeting hall where we met. And so we started with 127 and we finished with 127 members. I didn't lead that year, I managed that club. I knew in my heart of hearts that that club needed to change. I knew because I had asked a number of people that were my friends, my contemporaries, to come to those meetings, and they did not want to join. Today, the Hopkins Rotary Club stands at 48 members. To put it in perspective, I was governor in 1996, 97. At that point, Rotary had 1.2 million Rotarians, and we had 27,000 Rotary clubs in 167 countries. Today, we stand at 1.2 million Rotarians, with 34,503 Rotary clubs. 208 countries. Now, I come from the land of retail giants. Minneapolis, Minnesota is the home for the Target Corporation. It's also the home for Best Buy. It's a land that for some reason has a good sense of the consumers in North America and what they will buy. So we regularly hear sales figures. And the sales figures are given in the context of the same store sales. So if you want to think about Rotary today, how are we doing in same-store sales? Our 27,000 Rotary clubs that were in existence in 1996 have decreased significantly. Over the last 10 years, the membership in North America has dropped almost exactly 10%. We're seeing the same thing in most of the Western world. The only reason we are staying the same is the new clubs we've created and growth in the Asian world, in particular India and Korea. The model of the 1950s Rotary Club is a dangerous model for us to continue to be using. If my daughter, my two daughters are 27 and 29, if they were to look for a product today, where would they look for it? You'd probably say the internet, right? And yes, you're correct, but where would they look for it on the internet? They're not going to pull out their desktop. And I got to tell you, the chances of them pulling out the laptop are not very good. What they'll probably pull out is an iPad or an iPhone, or a competitive product to those two, and look for a Rotary Club. How many Rotary clubs do you think in our world today actually have a website that's compatible with an iPhone? The storefront for today and tomorrow for Rotary is going to be the iPhones of today and tomorrow. And we have to acknowledge that and realize that. We also have to understand where that generation is coming from. The question is going to be, are the simple trappings of tradition still appropriate as we move forward? I want you to stop for a second and think about what's important to you in the context of your Rotary Club and your Rotary experience. What would you name as the 5 most important things you would preserve moving forward? Maybe 6, maybe 7. Would it be having a meal together? Would it be meeting every week? Would it be a bell? What are the things that you would desperately want to make sure that my daughters take forward as a future leader for our organization? Tough stuff. At the highest levels, about a decade ago, the Strategic Planning Committee, before I joined that committee, defined the core values for Rotary International. They may or may not match your core values in your club. I'm not suggesting they have to, but here are the 5 that have been defined by the leadership as what we, at least at the highest levels, are going to do our best to preserve. And this is where Back to the Future comes into play. Number 1, in no particular order, the first is diversity. That's kind of a tough one. We're talking the talk, I'm not sure we're walking the walk, to be honest. Women came into Rotary in 1989. We still stand at only 21% worldwide. And I will tell you, in this country, you're only at 16%. We're doing not much better in North America. We're certainly diverse in the context of the business leaders that sit in the room today. And we're diverse in 208 countries. But are we diverse in terms of the representation of the business and community leaders that are part, or should be part of our organization? If you want to solve the problems of today and tomorrow, we need all the voices, all the perspectives, and all the talent with us at the same table. My daughters will not join an organization that is all white. I was in San Antonio just 6 months ago. I was doing some training there, and I attended and spoke at the largest club in that community, the San Antonio Rotary Club, 579 members strong. It was their 100th anniversary. And we got in some discussions afterwards, and so I asked the group when they were doing some brainstorming, what are adjectives that describe Rotary for you today or tomorrow? And an elderly gentleman stood up and said, male, pale, and stale. In 1996, when I was governor-elect for Rotary, now we're going back 17 years, Rotary International commissioned the Harris poll, similar to the Gallup poll, to survey young leaders as to their perspective on Rotary. I have to apologize, New Zealand was not in the mix of the countries that they surveyed, but they did survey 7 different countries, including North America and Australia, South Africa, Japan, Germany, France, England. The perception of Rotary among 35 to 50-year-olds at that point, the first thing was most of them didn't even know who we were. If they did, they came back with this. We're old, white, male, elitist, and not relevant. Now, that last one really hurts. And honestly, at the highest levels, at the Strategic Planning Committee for Rotary International, we just completed a survey, 10,000 Rotarians, 14,000 non-Rotarians, around the world. And the perceptions have not changed significantly in 17 years. We have, according to a branding organization that we've hired, an outside professional consultant, we have the biggest gap that they have ever seen in an international organization. And I'm talking about the gap between who we really are and how we are perceived. And we have to recognize that. We actually are an absolutely amazing organization. The problem is we're not perceived that way. And we have a tremendous challenge today and tomorrow to change our image before we die. You're doing a wonderful job of beating the odds in this club. I don't know how, I don't know the details, but you should pat yourself on the back because you've already heard the statistics as to what's happening around the world. In terms of the developed world, our clubs are struggling to stay the same, to survive. So how are we going to do it? Number one, we're going to have to embrace change, and we have to agree to be flexible, or at least allow clubs to be flexible. No longer can we take the American model of what a club should look like and expect the rest of the world to accept it and embrace it. The model of what a Rotary Club should look like should be based upon the community leaders in that community. The business and community leaders and what they want to do to embrace our core values. Interestingly enough, Chicago One, the original club, this year has taken 4 of their youngest members and asked them to meet for 3 months on their own. Going back in time. Because the original Rotary Club were 4 gentlemen meeting and deciding what they should do and how they should meet. They had no rules. They had no set policy that said they had to meet every week or that they had to have a meal or a bell. And so these young Rotarians in the oldest club around are taking a whack at a new vision. There's a club that's called the New Generation Club in Melbourne, where none of the members are over the age of 35. They meet for cocktails 1 night a week in a bar. All they're paying for is the drinks they buy in the bar. We have a club in my district that meets 2 times a month for cocktails. The oldest member is 38 years of age. Between their 2 monthly meetings, they have a service project where they meet. And then they have a no good purpose meeting once a month, where they simply get together and they can't talk about anything worthwhile at all. I don't know if they'll survive. But they have been instructed to embrace our core values. So I'm gonna highlight just 2 core values. Of the 5, the first one I talked about is diversity. Second is leadership, and we desperately need it today and tomorrow. Your club is filled with leadership. We need you to lead beyond just your club level, to be honest. You've got something magical happening because you're doing well. And we need that to be replicated, we need to analyze it, and we need your leaders to lead beyond the club level. Number 3, in terms of core values, integrity. Number 4 is fellowship. Number 5 is service. So I'll end by telling 2 quick stories, one in fellowship, one in service. So here I am, 12 years into Rotary, still one of the youngest members of my club, in a club where I don't necessarily believe much in what Rotary is. I'm 2/3 of the way through my year as president, and it's one of those cold Minnesota winters. We have those up there. You know, I've been here for almost 2 weeks. I left my wife behind. It snowed 13 inches on Monday. I'm afraid to get on the plane and go back home right now. When I was president that year, my wife and I decided to take a week off, almost 2 weeks. We took the kids out of school and we got up early and started driving south. Now I told the club the day before that I wouldn't be running the meeting next week. So we got up and we started driving. About 4 hours into it, I woke up. No big deal unless you're driving the car. And I was behind the wheel and the full-size van was going sideways down the freeway at 75 miles an hour. And I was looking across at my youngest daughter, Ashley, who at that point was probably 8 years of age. And I thought for sure that she wouldn't make it. And I turned the wheel just slightly in hopes of straightening the vehicle out. And the left front tire caught in the ditch. And we went tumbling down into the ditch. Every window, every skylight in that van shattered, gone. The roof of the van was like a teepee. And all 4 of us, thank God, walked out the front windshield, or what was left of it. Now we talked about continuing our drive south in the other car, and no one would get in the car with me. So we canceled the trip. And I found myself running the meeting the next week. And I had to do something I had never done before, which is stand up publicly and acknowledge a significant failure. And one of the oldest members of the club, a funeral director, you can laugh, it's ironic. He came up to me with tears in his eyes. And you would think he was crying because of the business he had lost. But he gave me a hug, and he said, "Tom, we would have missed you so much." And that's fellowship. That's a significant core value for us. And I know your club eats in a way that my club doesn't eat. And you do things differently than the way my club meets, or how you conduct business. But I suspect you have that kind of fellowship. That when somebody's down and loses their job, you're the first one to help pick them up. And when somebody's celebrating, you're there to celebrate with them. And you have fun together, and you care. And that's what we have to preserve and protect moving forward. I can only hope that my daughter someday will be in a club and experience what I experienced that day with that funeral director. So I'm going to end with a service story. And I've had the pleasure of traveling a lot for Rotary. And before I got all the titles, I did a lot of volunteer service work in developing countries. I made 10 trips to Haiti, have my 11th one planned in 6 weeks. And what we're doing in Haiti in terms of my district is water and sanitation projects. And I've been blessed to be involved significantly in those, and I've seen quite a bit on those trips. And I could tell you a different story from every one of those trips, because every one of those trips I see something that I've never seen before in my life. Whether it's hunger, poverty, starvation, health concerns. I met a mother one time who had 5 children and only one child in the group. had a change of clothing. The middle child, she was the smartest, so she got to go to school. And so she had to have a uniform for school. But you can't even contemplate this stuff. So on my 5th trip, I took my daughter along. And I often tell people that this is the best day I've ever had in Rotary. Far better than meeting past presidents of Rotary or future presidents of Rotary International. Far better than speaking in front of large crowds or anything that I've experienced. We got up early, flew into Port-au-Prince, arrived in the afternoon. We had dinner at a club in Port-au-Prince, a Rotary club. The next morning we got up at 7 in the morning and we started driving. 70-mile trip, 110 kilometers. It took us almost 7 hours to drive. It was almost 100 degrees that day, which is, I don't know, 37. About 20 miles into the drive, the air conditioning broke down in the car. We were sitting 4 of us in the back seat of a Toyota Land Cruiser. And previously we had just tried hard not to touch each other. And what we were now doing was trying not to sweat all over each other. And we arrived in a small community in Hinch. And we got there late. We were supposed to be there at 1 o'clock. We got there almost at 1:30, 2 o'clock. We walked into the church, and the church was filled. And they were there to have a church service to thank us and thank God for the water. And as we walked into the church, my youngest daughter, who was with me, Ashley, the same little girl that was in the van, now almost 19 years of age, she walked in and ended up sitting on a chair in front of me. Now the church was filled and there were no open chairs, but everybody in the church got up to give us their chair. And my daughter sat in a little short chair that had been occupied by a girl that was probably 7 years of age. About 20 minutes into the service, the little girl got enough courage up, kind of giggling, to touch my daughter's white skin. I suspect she'd never seen a white person before. And then I watched my daughter do the same, a little giggle and reach over and touch her black skin. It's an amazing thing for a parent to see that. And we got up and we cut the ribbon. We pumped the water for the first time. We drank from the well with the Haitians. And then we got in the car. We visited 6 more, I don't know, 3 or 4 more well sites. We ended the day back at Hinch, having dinner with the Hinch Rotarians. And they started playing music, and they brought out a DJ, and we danced. There were 7 women and 3 men on my team, and so it was a pretty good mix. About 4 or 5 songs into it, I'm dancing with my daughter. And she whispers in my ear, she says, "Dad, I never knew Rotary was like this." And I said, "You know what? Neither did I." At our core, service and fellowship are critical. If we're going to move into the future, we have to go back in time and embrace those core values. We need to put those out front instead of back behind. And if we're doing things at a meeting that is not attractive to the next generation, we have to have the courage to strip it away. And we have to have the courage to form clubs that will fit the schedules and the times of the next generation. And if they think they can only meet twice a month, I think we have to accept that. As long as they embrace what's important. Fellowship, service, integrity, leadership, and diversity. Sure, let me give you a couple examples that actually come from large clubs. The San Antonio Club has formed a club within the club. They have brought in 40 members under the age of 40, and that group meets 3 times a month on their own. And once a month they join the large club. Probably too much of a disconnect between the two, but I will tell you that the 40 under 40 are thriving and having a great time. They're meeting for cocktails in the afternoon. Inexpensive. The only cost is really the drink that they choose to buy. One of their meetings every quarter is service-oriented. It's food for thought. We have obviously electronic clubs today. I was involved in a 47-member electronic club meeting on Tuesday. It was far from perfect. I'm not a tremendous fan of those kinds of things. I will tell you this, the challenge is going to be to maintain fellowship. And fellowship is not a term that is a term used by my daughter's generation. To my daughters, it sounds like a meeting in church on a Sunday afternoon. And I can't come up with a more contemporary term for it, but it's part of our sizzle. If you want to identify our product and say what separates us from the competition, it's the combination of fellowship and service. I call it connecting for good. And I think that's maybe the best way I can label it today. How do we do that? It's a challenge. We're going to see a lot of different things, hopefully, in the next few years experimenting on this. Next question. Proposals that deal with this, associate membership where the dues would be decreased at the Rotary International level for the first 3 years of membership. And there are other similar ones that deal with both the costs of the meeting and the frequency of meetings, those kinds of things. The trouble is the council is made up of 538 past district governors from around the world. They're not necessarily the youngest people in Rotary, or necessarily the most change-oriented. So it's difficult to change those things at those meetings. But I currently am not on the board of directors for Rotary International. I am simply on the strategic planning committee. I have absolutely no authority, but I will give you my full authority to change the rules any way you want. I think we can't wait for the leadership at the highest levels. I've tried really hard to be active and progressive, and yet respect and protect our core values. If we wait for the senior leadership to move, we may be gone. There's an article you should find written by Melinda Moore. She's a strategist, a young woman in Australia. Google it, find the article, read it. It's right on point for us. It's frightening what she anticipates coming. The baby boomers have been carrying our organization, and they're rapidly retiring, and they're going to step down from leadership roles. And can they give up control in the next few years to the next generation and let things change so that we survive? If we wait for them to give up control, and it takes 20 years, we probably won't change quick enough as an organization to survive. But there's an after-dinner club in Melbourne, which is a new generation club. I mentioned it before. They're desperate to connect with others. I think if there's a secret to us moving forward, we need to bring young people in different models, and then we need to connect them across clubs. They need to get fellowship going, not just in one club, but across countries and across the planet. They are our best hope if we make sure they protect our core values in the process. So I appreciate the opportunity.